What is up, y'all? It's your boy Aniki coming at you with a quick drive-by theory video. This one, unlike the review, should actually be shorter just because it's a quick discussion on what I think is going to happen with Vestige for one and All for one. As we progress through the story, as we all know, Shigaraki has spent a long time in the story being built up as the main villain. We've had MVA, which was specifically designed to have him start to unlock his abilities, become comfortable with his past, understanding who he's been in the past and where he's trying to go in the future, and what his motivations are. We've had Shigaraki constantly being instilled with resolve. We've had All for One directly speaking on the notion of him making sure to actually become that leader, to learn how to interact with people, making sure he becomes the best version of himself possible, only for the Vestige to consistently talk about how they want to be in control, and specifically at the end of chapter 296 to say, my turn is never ending, meaning, well, I won't say meaning, but heavily implying that Vestige for one intends to keep Shigaraki's body as his. Now this is in very huge contrast with what the actual All for One has said throughout the series. Think back all the way to Camino Ward, when Best Genius is taken out. Well, specifically after Best Genius saves Gang Orca, Mount Lady, and the rest of the heroes that were there at the site, he goes, wow, you're really good with your quirk. It makes sense that you've reached the top, but that quirk wouldn't be good for Tomura, because Tomura's whole thing is Tomura's quirk itself is not a high skill quirk. It's got a low skill floor and massive payoffs. It's the definition of an OP character in most video games. And it's only gotten worse with the application of All for One, of course. But, so, if All for One is specifically tailoring his quirk build that he's passing on to Shigaraki for Shigaraki based on his personality, the thing that I can't say is that he 100% knew that the Vestige would decide that it was going to take over Shigaraki's body. In fact, what I look at it as is the All for One sitting in Tartarus when he says, it didn't go exactly how I expected, is pretty much acknowledging exactly that. But the thing that I think is very important here is that a quirk is an individuality. And if the consciousness, the memories, etc. are stored within the quirk, and you look back to what Shigaraki said when he told him your ego is too strong, master, then you suddenly come up with this idea that maybe what really happened is that the Vestige, once it got inside of Shigaraki's body, is now going off script. I don't think All for One would consider... Here's the thing. All for One's physical body is objectively going to die. The Vestige and him are two different entities entirely at this point. He can sense the Vestige, but the fact is, it doesn't seem to be that he's actually controlling the Vestige. This just seems to be that if you can get into the quirk dreamscape, you can kind of hear the echoes through. Because it's not like All for One was like, I know specifically what, the first user said to Izuku Midoriya. He didn't say that. He didn't say, I know exactly what that dude said. He just simply was like, I think I hear his voice. So I think you can kind of tell and sense each other through the ether, but they're not quite to the level that, he's remote control driving Shigaraki from Tartarus. That's not what I think the intention of this is at all. In fact, what I think it comes down to is what has been explained the same way that All for One mentioned people would scream and yell at him. The Vestige that he left behind can't help but want to take control. He can't help but want to take everything, including Shigaraki's body, for himself. So how do we resolve this? Where do we go from here? Well, I think about it this way. Shigaraki was, when he had to overcome Stain, needed to develop his conviction. When he surpassed Overhaul, it was about showcasing better leadership. When it came down to defeating Destro, this was about accepting burdens and power and a completely understanding the vision. And all of those villains were swallowed by, in a different way, Stain's followers, Overhaul's drugs, the literal Liberation War army itself. All of these characters were swallowed. And now there was something that was important that Rex said on our stream recently, which is that there should be no reason for any other major villains to come into place because Shigaraki is supposed to swallow them. Well, in this case, then Shigaraki needs to swallow All for One. But how does this work out? First off, I think the hand on his face plays a very important role, because while All for One genuinely wanted Shigaraki to lean into that hatred, he would have had no idea, because he would have never done this before, that Shigaraki leaning into that hatred would have led to the All for One Vestige being able to take control because he's so emotional. So instead, what I see happening here is that when Vestige for One arrives with the hand on face and the cracks, there's going to be a fight. ultimately, because All For One isn't going to want Vestige for One to actually be in control of Shigaraki, because that isn't immortality, that isn't actually him living, that's just the quirk going through. At this point, the quirk of All For One itself is becoming the villain, and Shigaraki is becoming a victim. Now that is a way that you can spin that, but what I think this ultimately ends up being is the final test and the rule of two for the Sith. If Shigaraki can successfully kill All For One's physical body, specifically himself, after All For One and the Vestige for One have some kind of clash or a fight in Tartarus, then that's how Shigaraki will become the true villain king. Not only will he have defeated All For One's physical body, but in the process, seeing what the Vestige is going to do, he may come to the surface just to make sure. Shigaraki is still calling him master, even now. Even though he's essentially accepting his role as the new villain king, he still refers to him as master. A king cannot have a master. That is not how it works. If I'm the king, I am number one. There's nobody guiding me. There's nobody leading me. I have advisors, not a master. I have counselors, not a king. So if Shigaraki's going to be the king of the villains, then he's got to do something to cement himself. And this is the final test. Remove All For One, accept that burden, because All For One himself accepted his death. And I think even more so, to finally see what his character is, All For One may intentionally free Shigaraki from the control of the Vestige so that Shigaraki himself can make that decision and carry that resolve forward, allowing him to not be possessed anymore. Or at the very least, giving him a strong gap, like increasing his resistance heavily to make sure that Shigaraki does not succumb to the pain or the weakness of having the Vestige in control anymore. Shigaraki's character arc has gone from embracing all of his hatred to having to move past it. And the thing about that is that will stop him from being just this emotionally angry, driven villain, and it will allow him to not get caught up in fights like he did this time, where he ends up taking a bunch of damage, didn't even consider the possibility of being woken up early, even though the circumstances of his wake up were literally a hero right next to him. That small bit of impulsivity and wanting to just like lash out, he's got to conquer that. Shigaraki needs to beat the symptoms and own up to what his quirk does to him. And in the process of conquering that, getting through those symptoms, he will also best the Vestige of All For One, allowing Shigaraki to become proper king. That's what I think is being set up in this story and where we're going to go with this prison break. So let me know if you think I'm wrong. I don't think there's a whole lot that goes against this notion because, again, the Vestige has its own consciousness. All For One is consistently fully aware that he is a mortal being, and the reason why he even said that he was doing this is because he knows he will die. He said, I know I'm going to die. These tubes keep me alive. When I thought I was immortal, fine. Like, whatever. Now that I know I'm not, I've accepted my humanity, and I pass this quirk on because he is a physical being that is guaranteed to die. The Vestige, because it contains a consciousness, knows that all it needs now is a host to keep living. So the Vestige, for one, now has a complete different agenda than All For One, and this leans into the triune God symbolism. I just realized this in this video as I'm talking to you now. One of the biggest parallels between Shigaraki and All For One and Jesus got the stigmata in their palms to show their salvation. If All For One is the father and Shigaraki is the son, then the Vestige, aka the quirk of All For One itself, is being set up as the Holy Spirit. It is a perverted, disturbing trinity. It is an evil trinity. Okay? I'm not going to give you a whole lecture on the triune God. I'm trying to avoid doing that. But the point is that we now have a completed trinity of villainy. And in the process, all of these things have to become one. So maybe the way Shigaraki kills All For One is by also absorbing his fake quirk, so that the All For One who is living as, who he is right now, that consciousness and that psyche gets pulled into the All For One dreamscape too. And then you have two All For Ones, the one who actually cares for Shiggy and the one who just wants to be in control. And those consciousness, all three exist in one body, making them three in one, and completely completing the deification of Shigaraki, which would also fall in line with as he becomes the king of the villains and king of Japan society. It would line up with the traditional Japanese approaches where the emperor is seen kind of as God or like as a God figure, which is a common thing in many schools of thought through ancient cultures, where if you are king, you're effectively a representation of God on earth. So we've got the stigmata, we've got the three identities, we've got, and like think about the like also Holy Spirit, literally a vestige that you just pass along. So yeah, I'm just gonna say that right there. We have to complete the Trinity. We have to have Shigaraki possibly pull both consciousness into him, so that they can go to war and stay balanced. And that's what allows Shigaraki to stay in control and be the sun that shines and leads others. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you have any other ideas about what could possibly be happening with this vestige or All for One. And if you like this idea, if this seems to make sense to you, if this tracks in your mind, if Vestige for One and All for One are going to war so that they can end up inside Shigaraki so that he can swallow both and become the villain king and the god of villains in Japan, and that makes sense to you, give a like, subscribe, and I'll see you on Sundays. This is just a random drive-by video. I was talking to Ian about this. I just really wanted to get these ideas out there. I'm going to throw some music in the background. I didn't really find any colorings. It is what it is. Have a nice day. Anaki out.